Have you ever noticed that the scariest things usually happen right before like a major life upgrade? Take me, for example, as I film this, I am 8 months pregnant with my first child, which logically I know I'm welcoming in this amazing chapter of love and great joy, but I'm also freaking terrified. You can probably think of your own fears that emerge in times of change or uncertainty. And depending on your Enneagram type, you employ strategies to stop these fears from happening. And unfortunately, those strategies aren't always the healthiest, which is why it's so important to be aware of your Enneagram type's core fear so that you can manage it instead of letting it manage you. For example, an Enneagram 1's core fear is being wrong, inappropriate, or corruptible. So when they make a mistake, it's not just an oopsie, it triggers the one thing in their life that they're trying to avoid. It's like a giant warning going through their whole body saying, danger, danger, if this happens, if you mess up, everything's gonna be destroyed. Which is why you'll find one so concerned with getting things perfect. They've internalized the lie that if they're anything less than this unreachable internal standard, then they deserve to be punished. Sometimes ones let their fear rule them so strongly that they just don't do things, just in case they get that thing wrong. So if you're a 1 and you're wondering why you procrastinate or why you're avoiding doing something new, now you know. For example, I know a 1 who secretly wants to make a little store, like a little Etsy store selling these crochet animals. You know the ones I'm talking about. They're so freaking cute, but she's afraid she's gonna be bad at it or she's not gonna be able to sell any of them. So unfortunately, she still hasn't picked up that crochet hook. Or take a look at Enneagram 2s. Underneath every 2's actions is a core fear of being rejected and unwanted. So they cope with this fear by making themselves indispensable to others. The thinking is like, if they need me, then they can't reject me because they need me. Flawless thinking. And while helpfulness is often seen as this selfless act of goodness, with 2s, it can sometimes become something a little more sinister. They become obsessed with being needed to the point that they forcefully insert themselves into other people's lives. At the root of this behavior is a prideful arrogance that they alone know what's best for others while simultaneously ignoring all of their own needs. And those needs could be something as simple as eating 3 meals a day, or something as deep as recognizing your passions and dreams and actually going after them, which can lead to 2s feeling like martyrs, resentful ones who are thinking constantly like, hey, why is no one meeting my needs the same way that I'm meeting theirs? Then you've got Enneagram 3s who see the word fail as a dirty 4-letter word because their core fear is being seen as worthless and unsuccessful. So they put all their eggs into one basket. If I can be the best at everything I do, then I'm never gonna be seen as a failure and therefore I will always be worthy of love. Learning about this specifically is actually the moment that I realized I was an Enneagram 3. All my life, I had been terrified of my parents not being proud of me. That literally drove like all of my actions. I desperately wanted to prove to them that all of the effort that they had put into me was worth it, that I was worthy of all the love that they were giving me. So I put all my energy into being the very best that I could be, which quite frankly was exhausting. And it wasn't even coming from this desire of actually doing the things I was pursuing. It was just coming from this instinctive place of fear. So the first time I read the core fear of an Enneagram 3, it was like seeing the inside of my heart revealed, like something that I knew about myself but had never put into words. But once I realized the why behind my actions, I was immediately put on a journey of looking for peacefulness, rest, and mindfulness in my life. Not to mention the incredible relief of knowing that I'm not alone. And that's my hope for you as you learn about your core fear, that you'll have that same aha moment that I had so many years ago. Which brings us to Enneagram 4s, whose core fear can be embodied in this horrifying scene. As a ghost, they float above their own funeral. The priest looks out on the sparsely attended mourners and says, "Would anyone like to come up and speak about the impact of 4's life?" And crickets. Nobody has anything to say. In fact, it looks like some of the attendees can't remember anything special or unique about the type 4, like their minds just went completely blank. So Ghosty 4 realizes with horror that their core fear has been realized. They died without having made any impact on the world, which is why 4s place so much effort and importance on being authentic, making art, and embracing all aspects of life, both beautiful and ugly. They crave more than anything to leave behind a mark that says, I was here and I mattered. Or look at Enneagram 5s, whose core fear can surprise them around any corner, in the form of someone asking them about something they know nothing about, in the form of unexpected visitors showing up at their front door, terrifying, in the form of not having enough time to recharge and still feeling obligated to go out into the world and perform. A 5's core fear revolves around incompetence. It's this little devil on their shoulder asking like, hey, what if you haven't prepared yourself enough to meet your own or others' needs? The impact of that possibility feels catastrophic to 5s, which is why a lot of 5s will take the easy route to avoid facing these kinds of scary situations by self-isolating and refusing to participate in life. Instead, they'll observe from the safety of their comfort zones, filling themselves with knowledge from rabbit holes in the hopes that that will be the thing that finally makes them prepared to go out and actually engage with the world. Then you've got Enneagram 6s who spend their days doing everything in their power to avoid their core fear, which happens to be fear itself. But I've always had trouble understanding exactly what that looks like for type 6s because it's such a broad term. But after talking to a bunch of 6s in my personal life and in my corporate workshops, I realized that the fear can be boiled down essentially into a 6 losing something that they feel like is vital for their survival. It could be losing a job that supports their family, losing an important relationship that provided reassurance, or losing hope that make the hard days worth the struggle. 6s long to feel like they're always standing on solid ground. So note to self, maybe don't move to earthquake-prone California like me. So anything that threatens that support and stability is something to be feared. As you can imagine, this can be pretty much, well, everything, hence fear itself. So that constant what if becomes this game of whack-a-mole with 6s where they defeat one fear only to have another one pop up in its place. But let's talk about Enneagram 7s, whose core fear is being trapped or deprived. I like to describe it as the ultimate FOMO, fear of missing out. But it's more than simply worrying about missing out on a fun weekend. Rather, it's this fear that they're missing out on all the goodness that life has to offer, which leads to a constant stream of mostly unconscious anxiety, with 7s asking themselves like, oh my God, what if I'm not making the most of my time on Earth? And this might actually surprise you because 7s aren't usually characterized as particularly anxious individuals. Until you realize that 7s are in the head triad, which means they have an emotional imbalance of anxiety. If you want to learn more about this triad, I'll link a video right here that explains that for you. 7s try to combat this anxiety by making sure they won't ever be restricted, which can lead to risky behaviors, flightiness, and gluttony. Then you've got Enneagram 8s who probably experienced their core fear early on in childhood when in some form they felt weak, powerless, or manipulated. That feeling was so jarring and uncomfortable that they vowed to never be that vulnerable ever again. So 8s spend their lives making sure they're always protected, and that protection also extends to their loved ones. And while that does sound admirable, if that fear goes unmanaged, it can lead to some really dangerous behaviors, like seeking power at all costs, steamrolling everyone in their life, and living by the motto, "May the bridges I burn light the way," which admittedly is super funny, but not when you think about how the way to optimal health for an 8 is by building bridges, not burning them down. Which is the opposite of how type 9s react to their core fear, being in conflict and losing connection with others. It wasn't until I did a survey on my Instagram where I realized just how strong this fear was. After asking people to share their type and their biggest pet peeve, I received over 500 responses from 9s who all shared similar annoyances, like being ignored, being talked over, and being taken advantage of. But you'll notice that fearful 9s purposefully mute themselves in order to keep the peace. because they're so afraid that connection is going to be lost with the people in their lives. It's a weird catch-22. 9s suppress their voice when speaking up is actually the thing that's going to make them feel happy and fulfilled. But I gotta apologize for something. I feel like we got really heavy in this video. So if you want some levity, I made a silly sketch about a very dapper ghost who is haunting all of the 9 types with their irrational fears. I will link that for you right here.